Well, hello everyone. This is session 12 and it's the design of learning. And in Deuteronomy it says, "And you shall teach them diligently to your children and speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up." I'll just say that again. "And you shall teach them diligently to your children and speak of them when you sit in your house and when you walk along the road, when you lie down and when you get up." Right back in the Old Testament, the Lord reminded us of the diligence of being able to teach our children. He wants our children to be taught. He wants them to be taught in the way so they can grow up into the Lord. It's amazing, isn't it, to have that wonderful call on our lives to teach children. And I have never regretted my decision to become a teacher. So let's have a look at the design of learning, and we're now looking at session 12. And we're going to be focusing on the redemption lens. And as educators, we know there's a link between knowledge, learning and living. And this is fundamental. And we need to have a true understanding of what it means to be human and how a human learns and how a human flourishes. And as Christian educators, we need to embrace that learning is complex. There are different levels of conceptualization, but at the heart of education is our mind and the way we engage our heart in the process of learning. We will be using our textbook today, and we will be looking at chapter 17, and it's called A Conceptual Framework for Learning. And one area I'd like to talk about is that deeper level of learning for discipleship. The Lord revealed to his people that he wants us to love him. He wants us to learn to love him and to put him first. Think back about the Exodus story, how the Israelites traveled to the promised land, and there was many things that they had to learn, and they didn't get it all right. But when God calls us to be his disciple, he wants us to have a personal, shared and communal relationship with him. He wants to use our learning experiences. He wants us to know about truth, and he wants us to be citizens of the kingdom of God. The Lord has woven together this web of relationships, instruction, encounters and activities to make learning meaningful and life-changing. Think of the disciples, and when the Lord taught them, he wanted to change their lives, but he used the narrative approach. Now, as we think about how we're going to teach children, I hope that we've been able to share with you the importance of the narrative, that to have a deeper level of learning, the students need to pay attention to the unique role of God's grand story and how we can use knowledge and skills to be wise culture makers and to serve and bless each other. The goal of learning then for us students is that we'll learn to love God with all our heart, with all our mind, with all our strength, and love our neighbours as ourselves. And when we do that, God begins to shape our pedagogical practices. I think back when Jesus taught his disciples, he had them around and he taught them through narrative, but all the time he was teaching, sharing and reflecting, and he used their own life experiences to teach them. And so it is with us. We must look into our culture and into our context for the information to share with our students about how, as Christians, we are to live in this world but not to be of this world, because faith makes a difference to every part of our life. When you think about learning, we often think about how we learned as children and how important for us growing up knowledge and skills was. I can't ever remember a teacher telling me that I would need all of these skills for life. There was never any integration of knowledge and skills into my home life, into my social life, or into any other part of my life. But when we look at teaching and learning, we have to show the students that we are talking about a way of living. Parker Palmer says this: the teacher is a mediator between the learner and the subject to be learned. I must take responsibility for my mediator role, for the way my mode of teaching exerts a slow but steady formative pressure on my students' sense of self and the world. I teach more than a body of knowledge and a set of skills. I teach a mode of relationship between the knower and the known, and a way of being in the world. The role of a teacher is very complex, but it does exert pressure on the students in our class. They get to know us, they get to know our values, our attitudes, our beliefs, and they start to take them on as themselves. We have a very pivotal role in the education of our students, and we must not take that lightly. It is a great calling on ourselves that we see our children as image bearers of Jesus, that we want the very best for them. So let's have a look at the teacher activity. What are your goals for your students in your class this year? How do you want them to grow? Think of that. How do you want them to grow? As teachers, much of our teaching is shaped by our own experiences and what we've done before, and the particular school that we went to, and what pressure that exerts on us, and what the expectations are. And if we are to be teachers designing the learning in our classrooms, we need to do it with the Spirit of God, so that we are helping the students to have habits and routines and patterns and practices to live by that are godly. They will only get that from us if we teach them. If we think of the act of hospitality and our students as our guests, how might we then frame and design our teaching and learning? How do we relate to our difficult students? The students are watching us all the time. How we treat difficult students is how they're going to treat the difficult students. If they feel safe in our classrooms, then they will treat everyone with respect and dignity. I don't know if you've come across David Watson, but his book called On Christian Teaching talks about how we can, as teachers, teach Christianly through various themes. Now think about a book on languages. If I was to get a book on Spain and read the book on Spain, the questions I would be thinking about was, where do I visit special tourist sites? What products might I buy? What services might they be? And I start to ask questions regarding the geography of the place, the people of the place. But what if then, instead of asking those questions, I then looked at the narrative of the people, about the way the people honor God, the way they treat each other. What if my pedagogy in the classroom broke down the cultural barriers to help the children understand the stories that shaped the culture of Spain? How might our students then communicate language to understand these people more deeply? What questions might they ask? We might find all about the history of Spain, the different armadas that they were involved with, the different religious wars, the Spanish Inquisition, Catholicism, the state of Christian affairs today, and then how might we pray differently for Spain? You see, when we're looking at our subjects that we teach, we cannot be neutral. We actually either give a positive or a negative impact. We must use our resources and activities in the classrooms to love students and to lead them to Jesus, because we are raising wise culture makers. God created us to be his disciples. Our goal is to raise disciples, to build culture, for our children to love each other, that they know the truth and the wisdom, and that they're asking questions like, in what ways can we find a link between teaching and learning so the students can use their gifts wisely for the glorification of God? The design of our teaching and learning activities should provide opportunities for discipleship. The structure of our classes, the resources, the assessment practices, the student participation should be linked to service, through which our godly character can be formed and sustained. And as we draw these understandings together, we want our children to have a deeper understanding, a deeper learning, and to flourish in classrooms where the teachers love them and engage them in ways that recognize their uniqueness and their differences. It won't be static learning about individual achievement in learning information, but it'll be the immersion of students in exploring the meaning and the reality of their complex lives. When we look at a subject, we have to ask ourselves, why do we have this subject in our curriculum? And how can I point children to God through this subject? We're not just teaching skills and knowledge. We are teaching children. We are teaching them values, beliefs, and attitudes in the way that we design our classroom. The way we do our body language will tell the children immediately what we think about the language of the lesson, about the topic that we're studying. They are watching us like a hawk, and we have to be image bearers that show that we love them and we want the very best for them. We want to arouse their curiosity. We want them to be learners. At the back of your material, there's a really interesting case study about a girl called Chandra. I really want you to read that and discuss it, because it opened my eyes to what's happening in classrooms. You see, we as teachers don't see everything that happens in the classroom. We don't hear what's going on. We don't hear all the conversations, but there's conversations going on, and we need to be part of that culture, the culture of our classroom. So, in conclusion, we have the honourable task of shaping the heart and minds of children. Let's not take that lightly. Let's think about the pressure that we exert in the classroom. You see, we are channels for learning. Teachers embody what it means to be citizens of God's kingdom. This work has eternal significance. May we, as God, in the in-between people who live in the light of eternity, trust God to work in and through us and for his good purpose. Remember what I've said before. We are the vehicle for the gospel. What an awesome responsibility that is. And I'll just finish with this little phrase, which I kind of like. A teacher once said, "I teach because I see people grow and change in front of my eyes." Being a teacher is being present at the creation where the day begins to breathe. Nothing is more exciting than being there when the breathing begins. I occasionally find myself catching my breath with them. Isn't it awesome to be a teacher? To have that responsibility every day to take those students through the lessons that you prepared for them. I trust that you have a great day. If you're listening to this in the morning, if this is the afternoon, I trust you have a great evening, remembering that you have been called to be a teacher. It's not just a career, it's a calling, and may God bless you as you are a blessing to so many. And I'll see you in next session.